You're listening to Informed Dissent. If you're a longtime listener, welcome back. If you're new, welcome, and here's the lay of the land. I'm Jamie Reed, a lesbian and a whistleblower who worked inside a pediatric gender center. My co-host, Lauren Leggieri, is a lesbian and a longtime LGBT advocate. Our co-host, Cori Cohn, is a gay man who underwent gender transition early in his life. All three of us come from the left, and none of us fit the story you've been told about who questions gender medicine. And that's not an accident. Every week, we cover the headlines you need to know across medicine, law, sports, schools, and prisons. And then we dig in. The three of us, together, and most weeks, a guest worth hearing from. We built this show because we believe that the most important conversations about gender politics are the ones happening between people with real stakes and real disagreements. Free inquiry, honest argument, and dissent that's worth something because it's actually informed. We welcome you.
This is your news of the week for the week of Saturday, April 18th, 2026. From Indiana, a grim story. Jonathan Richardson, a man who identifies as a woman and was convicted in 2002 of strangling 11-month-old Faith Lee, has been quietly released from prison 30 years early. Local prosecutors were never notified. They only found out when a citizen recognized him in the community. Richardson is now reportedly living in a women's shelter. Indiana Governor Mike Braun has since signed a law requiring the state to notify prosecutors before releasing any violent felon. A little late. Moving to the courts, the Montana Supreme Court ruled this week that blocking people who identify as transgender from changing the sex on their legal documents constitutes sex discrimination under the state constitution. The 5-1 decision goes further, declaring people who identify as transgender a suspect class, meaning Montana's sex definition laws will now face strict constitutional scrutiny going forward. In Tennessee, the Senate passed a bill 24-7 this week requiring insurers that cover gender transition to also cover detransition care, and mandating state-funded clinics to report transition procedure data to Department of Health. The bill heads back to the House before going to the governor's desk. Supporters say it addresses a real gap in care for detransitioners. Opponents are calling it a registry. And finally, across the pond, nearly a year after the UK Supreme Court ruled that women in the Equality Act means biological sex, the government has announced it will delay publishing single-sex space guidance until after local elections in May, a full 8 months after receiving a draft from its own equality regulator. Women are still waiting. Those are your headlines, and paid subscribers to Informed Dissent receive a full detailed breakdown of these stories and more delivered straight to their inbox every week. You can find us at Informed Dissent on Substack. That's your news of the week. Now on to the show.
Hi, welcome to Informed Dissent. I think this is the first time we have a repeat guest.
Really?
And it's Dr. Julia Mason.
Yay. Am I wearing the same jacket? I don't remember, but
I don't know, but this is also episode 65, if you can believe that too.
wow.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So we are going to travel today to two far off and distant lands. Should we start in Finland or should we start in Utah?
Let's start in Utah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Julia, you are here as our expert.
Great.
And can you walk us through what has been referred to as the Utah Review, how it came to exist, and how it's being used now? And then maybe we'll talk about its flaws.
Yeah. So Utah is generally a conservative state. And in January, 3 years ago, January of 23, so coming up on 3.5 years ago, the Utah legislature put a moratorium on initiating hormones for minors for gender reasons. And groups in Utah lobbied as they saw that this law was not going to be, they weren't going to be able to stop it. They said, okay, how about we put in there that the moratorium could be lifted if a systematic medical evidence review demonstrated the safety and efficacy. And the Republicans were like, yeah, sure, put that in there. Because at that point, every systematic review of the evidence had shown that the evidence does not support treating minors with hormones and surgery. So it got put into the legislation, and then the Department of Health and Human Services for Utah did a contract with the University of Utah. Well, these people who they're the pharmacologists. So usually their job is to review all the drugs for their Medicare and Medicaid programs. But they are already in the business of reviewing things. So they're like, you guys, do us a systematic review on the use of hormones and drugs for pediatric gender medicine. And so that was in April of 23. And by July of 23, they had a draft report, which is pretty fast. And long story short, the Utah review, kind of like WPATH identifies as a professional association for transgender health. The Utah paper identifies as a systematic review, but it is not a systematic review. It's just not. It's a lot of fluff. Like 90% of it is just tables taken from papers that they've highly redacted, so it looks ridiculous. And they said they were redacting things to protect the identity of patients. And it's like, dude, these charts were all in papers that are publicly available. Like none of this is private health information. But they're like, oh, saying the name of the clinic in Holland will cause trouble, so we're going to redact that. And so, like, it's a 1,000 people. So people are like, it's a 1,000 page report. Yeah, it's a 1,000 page report, and like over 900 pages of it is just nonsense. It's not even work. It's just them reproducing things with lots of redactions. And the whole point of a systematic review is that you start out determining what you're going to look at, which is the PICO, right? The population, the intervention, the conditions, the outcomes. And then you put that somewhere. Like you put it in the Prospero database and you're like, hey, we're going to do a systematic review of the evidence and this is what we're going to look at. And these are our criteria for papers. And you're supposed to do that because it's a quality control. If you say ahead of time what you're going to do and later on you publish your paper, someone could be like, well, why did you leave out this paper? It meets your criteria. This is a paper that you should have had in your review and you didn't. Your review sucks.
Can you just explain what Prospero is for people that might not understand what you mean by
Yeah, so Prospero is one of a couple places that you can pre-register your systematic review of the evidence. And I think it's the most used one. And I'm mostly familiar with it because the American Academy of Pediatrics in 23 said that they were going to re-up their terrible, no good, very bad statement on gender treatment in kids, and that they were going to do a systematic review of the evidence for some reason. No idea why.
So this is a platform for clinicians and researchers
It's a
to kind
platform for
of know
researchers to
what's going
talk to
on
each
in the
other.
field. Okay.
And so I've been going there and looking to see if there's anything that looks like the AAP has been getting ready to do a systematic review of the evidence. And no, to be honest, I haven't looked like in the past 6 months, but that's where like, that would be the first inkling that someone's about to do something. They didn't do that.
In
And then
Utah,
also,
they did not.
they didn't pre-publish their search criteria. And then they also they started out super enthusiastic because they didn't know what they were doing. And they're like, we're going to look at we're going to look at all the interventions and all the papers. And, and then they got over 200 papers. And then they're like, oh, damn, that's a lot of papers. Okay, we're gonna prioritize. And so they decided that some of the papers had high priority comparisons and another ones didn't. And that was just seemed to be a way to get rid of a lot of the papers they didn't want to do. Because like they decided that fertility was not a high priority outcome. And they initially decided that like regret was not a high, like there were specific things the legislatures had asked them to look at, and they didn't. Um, they didn't look at fertility, they didn't look at desistance, they didn't look at regret, and they didn't. The key thing they didn't do is you're supposed to pull all the papers, and then you're supposed to have multiple people abstract the information out. You're supposed to look for bias, look for problems, with the paper. You're grading the papers for quality. And then you're supposed to synthesize that evidence and give an opinion. And they sort of did some of it, but they didn't do it well. For example, Chen et al. 23, right? New England Journal of Medicine. And that's the one where 315 American children got state-of-the-art gender-affirming care at the best gender clinics in the nation. And the most common adverse effect was suicidal ideation, and 2 out of the 315 died of suicide, which is a horrific suicide rate. That paper
They died. They died of suicide also after
after the treatment
they were
began.
being treated.
They
These
had
were
been pre-screened for
correct.
suicidality.
Correct.
They were getting state-of-the-art care,
But they were
and
actually getting the interventions.
they were
And
getting the intervention, and it, did not stop them from killing themselves. Um, and they gave that, like, they said it was high quality and it had a control group because it had male and female. And it's like, no,
that's
that's not a
the
control
control
group.
group.
Yeah. So, and then another favorite, Tordoff et
Yep.
al., 22, which is the one where they started with a bunch of kids, and they said they were comparing the treated kids to the non-treated kids,
But
but
then,
basically, as kids got more stable, then they moved into the treated condition. And by the end, there were only 7 non-treated kids still coming back to the clinic. And they were not doing well because, like, these were the kids that even these really enthusiastic gender doctors were unwilling to treat. So they had some serious issues. And they said, okay, so we treated these kids and they didn't really get any better, but the ones we didn't treat got worse. So, if you assume that they all would have gotten worse without treatment, then the fact that they didn't get worse is kind of like getting better. So that was Tordoff, and they said that was good quality too. So they gave it they gave it a 6 out of 9. Whereas when the people at the University of York who were doing systematic reviews for Hillary Cass, they gave that a 3.5 out of 9. Because they're like, yeah, you don't really have a control group. If you're down to 7 at the end, you can't really call that a control group. And it wasn't a control group. So they so they gave Chen et al. 8 out of 9 on this Newcastle Ottawa scale of quality, whereas other people gave it a 5 out of 9, and then they gave the Tordoff 6 out of 9, whereas other people gave it 3.5. So they really overgraded things, and they didn't do any kind of synthesis, and they completely dropped long-term outcomes such that when they gave it to the legislator, they're like, yo, we specifically asked you for long-term outcomes. And they're like, oh. They gave them another $33,000, and then
okay,
they put something together.
okay, this is where I wanted to dig in a little bit. So
Okay.
the legislators paid them for this work.
Yes.
And when they went to first hire them, did they have like 10 applicants say, hey, pick us, we can do a systematic review, we've done it before?
I don't
Like
think that
bid on
any,
a contract, or did they
right.
hand it to this group?
They handed it to this group, and 4 out of the 6 people in the group had serious conflicts of interest. Like they were making their living doing gender medicine.
Oh, they're experts though.
Right, right. Those are the experts. Yeah.
Okay, so okay, let me just say this. If this systematic review was done well or correctly, or was actually a systematic review,
Mm-hmm.
and it showed different results than the other 11 that have been completed,
Right.
we should actually look at that.
Yes, that would be really interesting if like and SEGM, not me, but people in SEGM looked really hard at this. I think they put more hours into it than the people who originally wrote the report. Because it was such a mess. And there was, like I said, 900 pages of just sort of like heavily redacted charts and stuff. And they're really trying to figure out like what did they do and what is this that weeks of work and hundreds of hours just trying to peruse this 1,000-page document to try to figure out what's going on. And so if anybody really wants the full story, if you go to the SEGM website, there is an 80-page white paper that goes into serious detail about this paper and the problems with it.
Who would the audience for that paper be?
The white
Like the
paper?
legislators?
I think the audience would be anyone who's being asked to put this paper on the same level as the CAS review
I
or
see.
the HHS review,
I see.
because
Okay, that makes sense.
this is now when you're in fights about closing clinics or laws, this is their go-to, right? Because WPATH has sort of been discredited. And so now everyone's talking about the Utah review. Well, the Utah review was a systematic review of the evidence, and it showed that this is all safe and works.
Can I ask, do we know that if any of the people who did the Utah review are involved with WPATH?
That that is a good question. I should know the answer to that question, and I don't.
Because we've seen this multiple times where people on these boards and people doing are also on the board at WPATH, also heavily involved with writing the WPATH guidelines. So I would just be curious as to if the people who wrote the systematic review in Utah had connections to WPATH, if you're saying that a majority of them are making their living off quote unquote gender affirming care.
Yeah. I mean, my guess would be yes, but I don't want to, I haven't looked it up, so.
So
That'd be
what
cool.
has now happened in the state of Utah? So
Oh, so it went on. So
imposed the mor- so they imposed the moratorium. They
they
asked for
did the moratorium. They said, do the review. They handed in the review. And then they're like, yo, you don't have anything about long term. They're like, all right. They gave them another 33,000. They did the long term, which wasn't really long term. And then the legislation or the legislators did a full moratorium, I think in January of this year. Anyway, so it did not, it did like it didn't serve the purpose they were hoping in Utah. They were really fighting an uphill battle there with the politics. And so the reason that SEGM thought it was worth putting hundreds of hours of work into this is not because we were worried about Utah, but we were worried about people pointing to this report as solid scientific backing of the use of hormones and surgeries for minors. So in Utah, the legislators got the report and said, yeah, we're banning it anyway.
Okay.
Did they and what was the basis of them banning it? Did they make
I
those
think they
arguments that it was methodologically unsound? Did they
Well,
have any of these questions, or was this really on a like kind of a political.
I think it was mostly on a political basis. I'm not entirely sure, but they ignored so many things in this report. Like the CAS review came out and they didn't include anything from it.
So would this report be obvious to a layperson that there were flaws?
No, I mean that's my concern because
Well, I
yeah.
think how you would define that lay person. Um, I when I first heard how long this was, I immediately was like, that doesn't make any sense.
How many pages you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a bunch
It
of
made no
filler.
sense because I was
Yeah.
like, why? I, immediately, I was like, oh, they did something wrong. Like, it
Right.
was not like, oh, it's so long. This is great. I was like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. Why
Right.
is that
It's
long?
like the middle schooler who prints up their term paper in large font and triple
Yes,
spaced
that
and
is exactly like what
yeah.
I was initially like, there's something really wrong here. There's no way a because you're not synthesized, like the whole word of synthesize and like a review is supposed to be you do this like giant funnel and then you bring it down and you narrow it in and then you go, this is the quality
Right.
and this is what we're going like you if you don't do the funneling part, you're not
Then you're not doing a review.
review.
Exactly. Yeah, this
It
is the
really is
best thing you could
like
call this. You could call this a narrative review, but you can't call it a systematic review. But the University of Utah presented their papers at the AAP's 2024 National Convention. They had multiple episodes where they discussed their research and they called it a systematic review. And then, they called it a systematic review. There was a congressional comment letter that was signed by 106 members of the United States Congress, and they called it a systematic review.
Well,
And a letter
why
from the
would
American Public Health Association to US HHS, signed by 123 public health policy deans, described the Utah review as a, quote, comprehensive systematic review. So there's lots of people using that term. They
you
keep
said
using that
members
term.
of
I don't think
Congress?
that term means what they think it means. They don't know. So
Did
yeah,
you
there's a
say
lot of people in politics and in public health and in, pediatrics who are calling this a systematic review,
wait,
merely because it identifies as a systematic review.
I'm confused
Hmm?
by you said politicians signed a statement saying it's a systematic review.
Yes.
Okay. How is that like, is there a precedent for that? Are there other documents that are purported to be systematic reviews that have received the mass endorsement of members of Congress?
I'm sure. I don't know.
Isn't
Are you
it,
thinking of something?
doesn't that seem weird? Like, first of all, if a politician tells me something, I'm already thinking, hey, they're about to tell me a lie.
Right? How do you know
But
they're lying? Their mouth is moving. Right.
unless a member of Congress also happened to have a medical degree, why would anybody think that anything that they said was uh, worth hearing about?
wow, Cori, you really have an eroded sense of institutional trust.
Corey has been blackpilled.
No, it's just I I trust politicians to have opinions on policy, but not on uh, the integrity of a systematic review. That's not what their domain is.
Right. So they're just going by the label on the box.
Yeah.
It says it's a systematic review, so it is for them. But I'm a little more disturbed about like the presentations to the AAP and also the American Public Health Association should know what a systematic review of the evidence is. That is kind of what they do, or at least part of what they do.
Okay,
Is part of this though, like how, the way medicine operates to me seems to be very much an honor system,
Hmm.
which seems to not be working right now. So I can imagine that if, you know, respected colleagues hand you something that says it came out of a state institution and they say this is a systematic review, how many places go in and say, is this actually what you say it is, or are they just going to read the thing assuming that there was integrity in the methodology and that there was some kind of methodology? And yeah, I mean, it just seems to me that the whole entire medical system is just really like on your honor, like
Right.
I swear to
It's the
God,
chain of trust.
pinky promise, like
right. Whenever you have anything that's this complicated, you have to trust. I mean, not every doctor cannot like work out whether this treatment is the right treatment on first principles. No one's got time for that, So they call it the chain of trust. You just have to believe that the people teaching you know what they're talking about. And, that brings up a whole nother issue about how we're going to dig our way out of what's been happening at medical schools for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, okay, so Utah identifies as a systematic review of the evidence. It is not. It's messed up in many different ways. And I recommend anyone who has lots of questions go to the SEGM website. There's an executive summary. You don't have to read the 80-page detailed one. There's also an executive summary of the key points.
We can link to that, right?
Yeah.
We can. I will say, just because I care about the public interest overall, I kind of do worry that a state in our union gave a whole bunch of money to somebody to not fulfill the brief. Like, you didn't do the job correctly. Maybe they should give some of that back or be held in account, but
they just got like 150,000, and then when it was pointed out that they hadn't done one of the key things, they got another 33,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a review in Utah that is just claiming to be a systematic review, but we do have a better quality study out of Finland.
Yes. Right. So Finland is an interesting country because it has a national health system and everybody's got a number and they've got your number and they know what happens to you from birth to death. So that is a more, I think I'd say, high trust society, right? And Rita Kertakatiala, who I love, she was told quite a while ago, was it 2011? I think very soon after the Dutch published their papers.
She was told to open a clinic.
She was told, you're going to open a gender clinic. She's like, okay. So then she looked at the research that was existing and she was like, I don't know, this looks a little lame, but Finland is a small country. All the cool countries are doing it. We're going to do this. So she opened a gender clinic and she started treating, and as she had published by 2015, she had published a paper sort of being like, hey guys, the kids that are coming into the gender clinic are not the ones that you described in the Dutch papers. It's a bunch of teenage girls, and they all seem to have the same story about fantasizing being a lone wolf in the forest. And like, are we really doing the right thing for these people? And she started, collecting data, and Finland was Finland before Sweden in pulling back?
Ooh, I can tell you, keep going. I can tell you if I
so Finland and Sweden were the first countries to do proper systematic reviews of the evidence and to decide that the evidence was not there for transitioning young people. And
they were able, they were able to do this. Both of these countries have socialized health systems. So
so they have
my liberal roots showing, but like this has made the ability to track people long term much easier than in our system, where people may fall off, not have insurance, be on one insurance, be over here, see this doctor, and it's not all interconnected.
Exactly. And when you look at all of those papers that those Utah reviewers were looking at where they're like, it's all great. You've always got to look at the loss to follow-up numbers. Because if 40% of the patients are lost to follow-up, you have no idea what happened to them. And it's much more likely that they're unhappy than happy. The really happy patients keep coming back to the clinic. It's the unhappy ones that ghost you. So in Finland, you can't ghost your clinic. And the country of Finland, yeah, because they have a national health system, they have sort of a fiduciary responsibility to not waste money. And so they need to constantly check, are we spending our money properly? Is this actually good medicine? And so they really started pulling back by like 2019, 2020. And so this paper, this recent paper that was just came out, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, is looking at registry data, and it's looking at people who came in to the gender service who were less than 23, and from 2007 to 2019, I believe. And they noticed a big difference that happened around 2010 or 2011 in that the first ones were smaller numbers and were less likely to require specialist psychiatric care. And that's the key variable. So what this paper looked at was the utilization of specialist psychiatric care. And in Finland, you only get specialist psychiatric care if your psych issue can't be handled by a primary care doctor. Like, I'm a primary care doctor, and if a kid is failing half his classes because he has ADHD and he'll do better with medication, that's a thing that I do. Or if
General
there's
anxiety,
general
basic
anxiety,
depression.
major depression, simple
Correct.
things like that can be handled by primary care. And I think when you have a socialized medical system, they're working that even harder. Like they really want things to be handled by the primary care doctors. So if you get referred to the psychiatrist, it's because the primary care doctors they don't know what to do with you. It's extra. And it can be sometimes that you are referred to the psychiatrist, you see them only once. The psychiatrist suggests, for example, a change in your medication, and it goes well, and you just go right back to your regular doctor. So, because like I was talking about this paper on Twitter, and I had a Finnish mother show up in my mentions, and she's like, yeah, my daughter saw the psychiatrist exactly once.
So if you're having multiple interactions with a psychiatrist, with a specialist, then this is more than just a casual bump in the road. This is
Right.
exacerbated mental illness.
If one of these young people is having, 50 to 100 interactions with specialist psychiatry services, that's some serious issues.
What about
And
other health metrics?
Hmm?
What about other health metrics? Because this is like it being a socialized system, they have everything on this patient. So do they look at other health metrics as well?
They don't in this paper. This paper
is strictly
very
mental health.
simple. They just look at specialist level psychiatric treatment.
Okay.
Does it go up? Does it go down? How much is there? And they break it up into things like people who had no visits, 1 to 5, 6 to 25, 26 to 100, or greater than 101. And so they had 4 groups. There were, well, it depends, 4 groups, and you can also break them down by sex. But there were young people who came to the gender service and were deemed eligible for treatment and got medical treatment. There were young people who came to the gender service and were deemed ineligible for treatment, usually because of psychiatric problems. And then they had control groups, and they selected, I think, 4 4 females and 4 males for each of the gender patients who had the same birth date and the same, they came from the same part of the country. So they had big numbers for sort of the general population. And it is interesting, even in the general population, it was like 26% had at least one psychiatric visit, which I'm like, wow, that's something. But Dr. Kaltiala recently did a little interview with Ben Ryan addressing some of the concerns, and she says we regularly screen all of our population. And so, because one of the arguments is like, okay, this paper showed that the kids that went to the gender clinic had a much, much higher use of specialist psychiatric services after treatment. And some people are like, well, duh, you're going to a clinic, and so you're more likely to have your stuff picked up because you're seeing professionals. So it was just chance. It was just like, well, they're not suffering alone in the woods, they're going to the clinic. And so, but she said, no, we screen the whole population. And the fact that like 1 out of 4, even in the general population, had at least one visit kind of backs her up on that. But
when somebody's
the people who did not get medical treatment at the gender clinics had a pretty high rate of specialist psychiatric care. And then the people who did get treatment started out better off, but by the end of the study period, they had just as much as the ones who didn't receive treatment. So you cannot make a claim about causality when you're looking at medical records. You can only talk about the association. You can't say this caused that. But you can definitely say that the people who got the gender medical treatment did not improve.
Yeah.
That did not happen. And the males who were given estrogen, was it like 6 times their
It looked like
use?
around 60%, I think.
Yeah, it went from 9% to 60%.
Yeah.
It was just stunning. And then the females who got testosterone, it went up, but it went up multiple times, but not 6 times. It went up like 3 times.
So Cori, I think you had something to jump in. I'm just gonna add a fact before you go. Just in terms of systematic review timeline, you asked about where Finland was and when
when Finland closed. Yeah.
Finland completed its national systematic review in 2019. Sweden's did not occur until 22. So I think in the timeline, I think Finland went first,
Finland was first.
then Sweden.
Yeah.
After.
And I think that's kind of the reason that the data set ends in 2019, because 2019 is when they did their systematic review.
Did their review.
And then they changed their practices.
Yeah. Cori, did you have something?
I just wanted some elaboration.
Mm-hmm.
What is like specialized care in this?
Specialized care means that you have psychiatric needs that can't be met by the primary care doctor. You're unstable, you're not responding as expected. It also would include psych hospitalizations.
What about like an ongoing relationship with the therapist?
No, this is not including an ongoing relationship with a therapist. That is totally within the primary care bucket.
So if you're doing something like talk therapy, you do that with your physician?
No, you don't do talk therapy with your physician.
But they don't consider that specialty psychiatric.
And that's not considered specialist.
Okay. That's what I was trying to figure out. So
when I'm thinking specialized psych care, because I used to have to triage this out, one of the things we did in the US is I kind of had a checklist. If you're going to go to that level for psych care, you had to have tried and failed 3 or more basic psychotropic meds. So this would have been like your primary care tried you on Zoloft and, some of the real basic, everybody's on these.
Right. Right.
So you had to tried and failed 3 or more psychotropic medications. You have had to had serious suicidal ideation within the past 3 months that landed with the need for emergent care. So maybe a referral to a line or a hotline, or you had to have a safety plan created for your home, or you did have to go to the emergency room. But then the other things that were like, yes, you need specialized psych care would be any worry of psychosis, illusions, borderline, bipolar, dissociative, anything that seemed
A higher level.
right.
Basically a higher level of care. That's what they're looking at there.
Somatization disorders, functional, like people that believe that they have complex medical needs that cannot be proven. I would say the serious OCD kids, like the can't leave the house, I can't stop, like obsessing over things. I mean, I can think of kids who are pulling out their eyebrows or eyelashes, or they had bald patches from the level of like really serious mental illness.
So this is way beyond just what we think of as like if you went to go see a therapist for anxiety or depression or.
No, these are like the adolescents that, I mean, I have weird examples, but like kids who would become so fixated on nail polish, they couldn't leave the house and go to any store that sold nail polish because then they would steal it or hoard it, like weird. I mean, I don't mean to like call people with serious mental illness like weird, but like, I mean, I had patients who, they were just really ill.
So these would be psychiatric services that people need.
Yeah, selective mutism. They stopped talking. They would attack people. Like these are really mentally ill.
Right. This is serious stuff. And the other thing that's worth looking at is the kids that were medicalized had they had more if you just did binary, they had specialist content more, but they also had more visits. So 23% of them had 0, 11% had 1 to 5, 16% had 6 to 25, and of the group that had over 101 visits, that was 27.6% of the gender treated patients. So like the biggest group of gender patients was the one who had the most visits.
And these were people who were screened out at first for any psychological comorbidities, correct? So they went in.
These are the ones that were considered to be
sound.
stable prior to treatment.
Okay, so couldn't you claim though that these were individuals who were medicalized and they now were experiencing a whole lot of hate? Maybe
the minority stress. This is the go-to.
Okay, so why is it not that? Couldn't have been that?
Well, one thing was that in general, acceptance of transgender people and gender nonconforming people went up in Finland over the period, and the group of people who presented to the gender clinic prior to 2010 did much better than the later group. So as time went on, the patients had more mental health issues, not fewer. And so, the argument always seems to be like, oh, they have mental health issues because they're trans. They're trans and it's hard to be trans. And so you have mental health issues because your life is hard, because you're a minority and it's hard to be trans. But what this data is suggesting is possibly some of these people are trans because they have mental health issues.
Okay, so
which way does the association go?
Can I just take a step back? So you were saying that in the data, the the people who medicalized a long time ago seem to do a little bit better than the kids or the young people that are showing up more currently.
Yes.
Okay, I have a hypothesis here, but
Okay.
my hypothesis is those people were gender nonconforming, truly gender nonconforming, and most likely homosexuals who
Right.
were able to transition and either have some comfort in that transition or passability in that transition. And they were not seeking transition because they were in an ROGD cohort or psychotic, but they were doing so because they were gender nonconforming homosexuals. That would be my
That'd be your
that
theory
would be
for
my
that,
theory.
which is, yeah.
But again, this study only looks at mental health. So we
Right.
we haven't looked at a full systematic review that looks at the ongoing long-term physical side effects. We don't have
Right.
any.
And I don't want to
I
call
don't want
this
to
a
use this
systematic
is not
review.
systematic. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I
systematic review is when
okay,
you look
yeah.
at papers.
Okay.
This is
This
looking
is
at
just a paper.
patient data. This is a high quality paper. This is high quality research. And it's some of the highest quality research that we've had because there is no loss to follow up, because they're able to follow every patient, because they went to the trouble of setting up all this very large control group. But because it's a paper that's looking at data from the past, we can't claim that we know what caused what. We can only show the association. And so for the boys that underwent feminizing gender reassignment, their rate of referrals to specialist psychiatric care went from about 10% to 61%. And the girls went from 21% to 54%. And that's a lot. And then,
Yeah.
like I said before, of those gender treated kids, 27% of them had more than 101 of these specialist visits, which indicates a lot of problems.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to dig here for a minute if I could. So first of all, this is very similar to what I saw working in a center, which was that these kids got worse. They didn't get better.
Yes.
I'm also going to say this, that the boys getting worser, I don't think that's a word. What's the word there?
Worse.
The
More
boys
worse.
getting more worse than the girls, to me, actually is understood when you understand the chemical reality of the hormone itself and the treatment. And so what this data one of the reasons why I see this paper and this data and I go, a reasonable inference makes sense here, because when I think about the chemical structure of the drugs being given, we're giving girls testosterone, which can, and we already know, has a mood enhancer. It
Right.
enhances energy. It
Right.
enhances focus. It enhances, like, we know what testosterone does just on a chemical level. And when
Right.
we're seeing in this large data set that the boys got worse, what we know from the chemical profile itself of estrogen given to the body in those high doses is that would create a response of lethargy, depression, you're tired, you don't have as much energy, you don't have it does we know that that's what it does in the male body, but it also grows breasts and it makes some men who take it feel more even keel or like
Right.
chills them out.
Right.
But we just know the chemical.
Or more of that is the testosterone suppression.
Yes.
Some of these patients are very relieved to have that driving testosterone gone.
But uh, when I look at these numbers that the boys had even these higher referral rates, I just think that the chemical profile itself bears that out.
No, it does. I mean, it definitely correlates in that way. And
when your body is when you lose your energy, when you get tired, when you're maybe more irritable, when you feel those things happening, I also think there's a strange disconnect in the person because on one hand, they're being told this will make you euphoric.
right.
And this will be the salvation. When you're told that, but then you know how you physically feel, I actually feel like that could cause more disassociation and
Yeah.
more anxiety, depression, but also true psychosis and like what is happening within my body and myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, transition transition offers a way out of your distress, and it's a hard path, but the steps are all laid out for you. And so a lot of people, it's just really appealing for that reason. But then at the end of it,
I don't know that it really offers a relief from distress. I feel like it offers a distraction, a long-term distraction, because there's this multiple step process.
yes.
But I mean, at the end,
At the end, you're still you.
yeah.
Yeah, wherever you go, there you are. But I think that's part of what pulls people into it is this promise.
Yeah.
It's not a
Yeah.
promise that gets fulfilled, but there's a
Yeah.
promise because
And a process. Like
no one's
steps you
allowed
can
on
follow.
Reddit, on these Reddit subgroups to talk about how things aren't going well because that's all internalized transphobia. And so we shall not speak of it. Um, and so I had the same experience, Jamie. I didn't see nearly as many gender patients as you, but of the patients I saw that started gender reassignment therapy, they weren't thriving. They just weren't thriving, and that was part of why I got interested in this.
Here's the other thing, which I find so fascinating, is that they were not thriving. Okay, these patients were not thriving, but what they were telling the public and the
Hmm.
world, and sometimes even their parents,
Hmm.
was often different from what they're telling the provider or me in my role in private in the room.
Oh, wow.
And so there were many patients who they didn't want to acknowledge that they could have gotten something so wrong.
Sure. Yeah.
But then because one of the things we did with every single patient was that when you came in, you filled out a PHQ-9 and a GAD-7.
Hmm.
So we're having you tell us on a written piece of paper in private, what does your depression and anxiety look like? What are your suicidal thoughts look like? And what the hypothesis was that I should see across the board positive changes in those scales,
Hmm.
right? That these should be getting better.
Right.
Um, I was not seeing that.
Yeah.
And when I started to even put those together as data sets, in some ways, the kids who seemed to be okay could mostly manage and get through, primarily the girls on testosterone for that short period. And again, we're not talking anything about physical health.
No. And the
But
long-term side effects tend to take a while to show up.
those boys, the other thing with the boys is that um, I was there long enough that the boys who I thought passed, when you think of this minority stress model, these were boys who physically looked the part and could be out in the world and could be out. They were sometimes the ones whose mental health was almost the worst.
Right.
Right.
Because, well, they're just working so hard every day. That's an incredible stress to keep up
But it's not
appearances.
minority stress, because if they're passing, people don't know.
No, yeah, it's not. It's internal. It's just the reason that they're passing well is because they are working so hard.
Yeah.
They're constantly thinking about how they're moving. They're constantly thinking about how they're appearing. They can't just relax. And that's got to wear on you. But I think it's worth bringing up the scandal of the CAS review, which was that the adult gender clinics refused to share information about how the Tavistock patients did.
You mean
After
once they went from the youth gender services to the adults,
that.
and those adult services would not release
They
that information.
refused to share any data. And you just got to think, okay, why aren't you sharing the data?
Yeah.
That's sus.
Cori, can I put you on the spot? I mean, are you willing?
Well, let's try. Let's see where it goes. Maybe I'll say no.
Are you willing to talk about, I mean, you're a cohort of one, but your experiences even with estrogen, I mean, the lethargy, did you experience that?
Well, so this is a difficult question for me to answer for a couple of reasons. One is I started taking estrogen when I was 18. And that was 33 years ago. So I've acclimated so much that I don't have any mental model of before. And besides, when you're 18 years old, that's not a good snapshot of what normal is for an adult male. And I really can't tell you. I can tell you what my recollections are, but they're from me thinking about it, not from me summoning the feelings about it.
Okay.
But estrogen did, like I was able to rationalize, as a lot of young men in my position do. I was able to rationalize that, oh, I should have been taking estrogen all along, because for a male, the sex drive can really be kind of obsessive. Like it's intrusive. Maybe that's a better term for it. It's intrusive. And I really hated the sensation that something could compel me to arousal, and that's all I would think about. And being relieved of that was amazing, because I wanted to be the master of my body, the master of my mind. And without having any ability to know in the future that was really just a phase that was happening because I was at a stage of puberty, being relieved of that was a tremendous boon. I wanted to be this person, not this person.
Yeah. And you did well for quite some time. And that's what Dr. Caltiala says is, when I first met her, which is years ago, she was like, well, if they come in and they're fairly stable, then they'll probably continue to be stable. But if they come in and they got problems, this does not help. So that was the first thing she was willing to say, that,
That was the first thing that's interesting.
Yeah, if they come in and there's just this one thing, like their life is pretty good, but there's this one thing that they'd like to change, then they do okay. I mean, obviously, some of these patients have to be doing well. These gender doctors are not satanic. They're not psychotic. I think they're confused. I think they suffer from sort of I don't know. They view themselves as being life-saving heroes. They went into a branch of medicine where you can be a life-saving hero merely by writing prescriptions for unusual drugs.
Yeah.
Not by
Yeah.
developing incredible skill in surgery or diagnostic acumen or any of that, because there's no diagnosis. You just ask the kid, and then you give the kid what they want, and then
Yeah, you're
suddenly you're a
right.
hero.
It's a very easy road to quote unquote virtue.
Right. It's a very easy road
Yeah.
to virtue and being considered a hero.
And an expert.
And so I think these people are maybe a little simple-minded, and they're deliberately ignoring the possible bad outcomes. But I do think that they have some patients who come back and tell them, "Oh, doctor, this is awesome." I mean, Jamie, you talked about the fruit basket.
I did. But I'll
But you added an interesting detail today, which is that maybe even some of those patients that are professing, you know, greater happiness, their PHQ-9 scores are not improving because at the same time they're stressing out under the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the other element, and I'm almost afraid to say this because there will be some people who will not like this analysis. But if I separate out, if I can take out what I know is going to become the medical, physical, long-term harm, if I remove that entirely, if I remove fertility,
If that was possible.
if I could remove that and I just look at this intervention from what it was intended to be, which is a mental health treatment, this is a intervention that I think I could properly categorize as a wash.
Mm,
So, like we said, the kids that came in that were mostly doing okay, for the most part, if we're only looking at mental health, they're for the most part going to do okay.
right. But
Then,
then, yeah, it takes years for the physical
right. And then there's about a
deterioration.
third who were not doing great, that this was a mask or they're going to do worse. And then there's almost this like neutrality, like it was an intervention that just was a wash.
Yeah. Yeah.
And on some level, if there was no medical consequence, if there was no fertility, if there was no societal level impact on a treatment that's a wash, then on some level, who really cares? It's just a wash. Okay, whatever.
Except that there are all of these really
Yes.
That's the
serious
problem.
physical, so with estrogen, the risk of stroke starts to go up 7 years in. And autoimmune
Right.
diseases.
It's the
Yeah.
physical, the fertility, and then I will never take away the societal level impact.
Yeah.
But it is just a wash. There's just it's not that it hurts. It's not that everybody walks away and they're like all suicidal and depressed afterwards. It's just like meh. It's just a meh intervention for what it was intended to be, with a
Right.
whole bunch of physical
With
shitty
so many
side
side
effects,
effects and yeah.
fertility, and a societal impact where you're targeting gender nonconforming people and you start lying to women and girls and that's the downstream societal.
Right. And
I'd
you
like
start
to
messing with
challenge
reality
that.
for children,
Yeah.
little children.
Yeah.
I'd like
Yeah.
to challenge that.
Okay.
Ooh,
Because what you're saying, Jamie, makes some sense. That you're saying that if you take all of the best cases and the worst cases, they kind of cancel each other out. Except the worst cases also include people who've committed suicide. And
Right.
I don't think that you can, there's no equivalent on the positive for
it's like trying to divide by
anti-suicide.
zero. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a quote unquote mental health intervention that either doesn't do anything or makes someone kill themselves. That was designed to stop people from quote unquote committing suicide.
I'll play devil's
So-
advocate though. Some of those positives, we don't know if I mean, this is what the other side would say. They might have committed suicide on the other side if they didn't have it. I just think when you're just looking at pure statistical intervention question about giving drug of any kind, when you just come to this basic bleh wash across the board, it's not good here, it's not great there, there's a bunch of neutrality. I think that's when people talk about there's just no good quality evidence, I mean, that's really what you see, is that every study that looks at how does this do in the treatment of what it's intended to treat. It's just like whatever.
Right.
Not
It seems
very
to be
good.
like a third do better, a third do about the same, third get worse. But when you have a treatment that doesn't have a strong positive effect, then you need to look at the costs. Then you need to look at
Exactly.
the side effects. And those are profound.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I will grant that there are some people who go to a gender clinic, get cross-sex hormones, and then seem to, do great and tell everybody they're happy, and that there are people who continue this way for quite a long time.
I've
I
always
don't
said
think
that.
that the existence of those people means that we should be treating all of these troubled children with this medical pathway that mostly doesn't help
Okay,
and
but
has all these side effects.
here's the other problem, Julia. I've ever since I ever became public, I've always said there are absolutely patients and families who have said this was helpful to me.
Oh.
The problem with an informed consent for any model of care, though, is we were not telling families that basically a third are going to have no real change except, 10 years from now, your body's going to start falling apart. A third, mental health is going to tank, and a third, hey, you will feel better. We weren't telling people this is a wash. We were telling people this is your true, authentic self. It will save you. It will make you a brand new human being, and everything will be perfect.
Right.
That was the core problem I had, because I was like, hey, if we're just going to be honest and tell everybody this is really meh data, and a bunch of people, if you're fine, you're fine. If you're worse, I mean, that it really doesn't. But that's not
Right.
where
Who would go for that? Like,
who would go for that?
who would go for that if they knew?
A lot
Right.
of people.
It's still a lot of people. It's true.
Because
There's
But
still a lot
also,
of people who will go for that.
doctors don't promote meh data the
But
same
should
way.
insurance be paying for this?
no, probably not, especially not public insurance.
Yeah. Yeah. There are people who get fake horns sewed onto their foreheads. Like there's people who think a lot of things will make them happy. And
My red shirt today was making me happy, even though Lauren and Cori decided to mock it.
Wow.
They don't like the ruffles.
No.
Well, my jacket makes me happy. Laura Becker.
I love your jacket.
Yes. Laura
Right,
Becker
Lauren?
made
It's an
me a
amazing jacket.
painting, and this jacket is based on the painting.
Okay, so to maybe wrap up a little bit. So, in the grand scheme of things, Finland is giving us a paper,
Mm-hmm.
single paper. It's not a systematic review of evidence,
Right.
but
It is a chart review.
but it adds to
The growing bulk of evidence saying that these interventions are not
You could
efficacious.
also look at remember the Swedish paper that just looked at mortality in
Yeah.
gender patients, and all causes mortality is just a lot higher. These patients die at earlier ages. So yeah, these Nordic countries with good health records can give us useful information. The question is whether anybody's gonna pay attention to it. But
Well,
they're
we are.
spinning massively, like they're really trying to take down this paper, and what they're coming up with is pretty lame. I think we've addressed some of it here today.
Well, my takeaway is that I would like to have a nationalized healthcare system.
Me too.
Oh, prepare yourselves for the comments on that one.
I know.
I
But
love the data. I love the ability to track. I think it has a public health component that is immeasurable in what it gives you in the long run.
it's just that it works better in a high trust society, and at the moment we're moving into a low trust society.
Yeah.
So, although I like it and I think it's the best, I don't know how we get there. And then also the Canadian system is getting a little scary looking from here.
Yeah, well, they're killing
My view
people
of
now.
Canada from here is getting a little.
Okay. Can I just add one more thing? Also, the entire country of Finland smells like pine trees and it's like beautiful. So I'll just add that in.
I wish I'd gone to Finland. I really missed out.
The sun didn't set until 2 a.m.
Wow. Of course, that means the sun doesn't rise in the wintertime.
Correct.
Yeah, the sun sets before school is out in the wintertime.
Yes. Well, Julia, thank
Yes.
you as always.
I'm glad if I was of help.
You are.
Yeah. It's always good to talk to you guys.
Looking forward
Thank
to your
you.
next visit.
Oh, can I want to do one little thing. If amongst the viewing audience of this podcast is a pediatrician, a general pediatrician who is hating their life because they're gender critical and they cannot speak out because they work for a place that frowns upon such things, my office needs another pediatrician. Seriously, we need a pediatrician.
Okay, so this is Julia is trying to hire, needs a new pediatrician.
Reach out if you want to be able to say what you want. There you
There
go.
you go.
That's it.
Thank you.
Bye.
This podcast is produced by the LGB Courage Coalition, a registered United States nonprofit fully funded by small donations like yours. We work to promote evidence-based medicine, ending the medicalization of gender nonconformity, and advocating for LGB rights. Supporting this show means supporting that work directly. If what you heard today mattered to you, please like, subscribe, and pass it along. Word of mouth is how independent shows like this one survive. You can reach us in the Substack comments section or by email at lgbcouragecoalition@gmail.com or through the contact page on our website at lgbcourage.org. We want to hear from you. And until next week, stay informed and ready to dissent.